The PEI government's marijuana plans are coming under fire. The province unveiled its strategy last week. The legal age of use and purchase will be 19, and cannabis will be sold through the Liquor Control Commission at retail outlets separate from their current stores. Now, one consumer advocacy group calls the regulations, quote, tremendously misguided and a threat to consumer choice. David Clement is the North American Affairs Manager for the Consumer Choice Centre, and he joins me now from Toronto. Thanks for joining us on Compass.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
So explain to me what your biggest concern is here.
So there are two major problems with what the province has unveiled so far. The first is accessibility. So in order to suppress the black market, which is the goal of legalization, we have to focus on a consumer-friendly and market-friendly model that really advocates or pushes towards consumer choice. And the reason why that matters is that accessibility and price are the two leading factors as to what will shift consumers away from the black market. And so our concern is that if the legal framework that is set up in the province is not consumer friendly enough or not accessible enough, that consumers will still purchase the good, purchase cannabis in the black market like they currently do now.
But on the other side, from the provincial standpoint, couldn't you have an argument that by keeping it in the hands of government and keeping it in sort of protected retail outlets, that you're keeping it maybe out of the hands of a younger generation?
Sure, I think the province has said that. I would point out that there is a regulatory framework for private retailers selling age-prohibitive goods like tobacco. So we have private retailers sell tobacco products. Across Canada, we have a framework for tobacco or alcohol, depending on the province. And there's actually a lot of good research in terms of the likelihood of private retailers not IDing. I think that's a valid concern. But when we look at the research and we compare private outlets versus government-run stores, we often find that these private retailers are more likely to ID because there's a lot more at stake. So when a government outlet doesn't ID properly, maybe the individual loses their job. But when a private store doesn't ID properly, they lose their license to sell that product. And so the incentives are skewed in a way in which it really incentivizes and maintains that best practice. So I would argue that we have the framework for age-prohibitive goods with tobacco. We should replicate that in terms of allowing for private retailers to enter the cannabis space and avoid having kind of a heavy-handed single government approach.
Now, the province's plans are in its early stages, of course. Is there anything that you liked about some of the ideas or the plans that have come so far?
There isn't too much to celebrate when you compare PEI with the other provinces. Unfortunately, they've gone the route of having the government have complete control over retail, which we're concerned with. But they've also gone the route of not allowing for any form of public consumption, which includes outdoor consumption and more specifically lounges, which would be almost like a bar type setting, but for cannabis use.
I understand that those things may evolve over time, like this is going to be fairly new. So what do you suggest then in the interim? Because you obviously wouldn't want to see just anybody walking down the street smoking a joint. You can't walk down the street drinking a glass of wine.
Of course. And what you highlight there is a very good justification for why we should have lounges. The sooner the better. So the reason why we don't have rampant public consumption of alcohol is mostly because people can consume alcohol in a controlled setting, in a bar or a club where they don't bother other folks. And so if we go the route of having these lounges for cannabis consumption, it actually takes people off of the streets and away from bothering other people into that controlled setting where they're in an establishment that's for that purpose. We don't have to worry about the public consumption or the nuisance that maybe some people are worried about.
David Clement, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's David Clement. He's with the Consumer Choice Centre.